This rolling pin was meant to flatten dough. That is what my father taught me. That is what his father taught him. You press down gently, you roll outward, you create something that rises in the oven and fills a home with warmth, with life. But here, in this bakery, on this morning in the third winter of occupation, it is no longer just a tool of creation. It is a weapon. It is a shield. It is the only thing standing between me and the man in the gray uniform who is staring at me from across my own counter, waiting for me to make a mistake that will cost me everything. My hands are trembling. The flour dust on my apron looks like snow, but it doesn't feel clean. Nothing feels clean anymore. I have 60 seconds to decide. Do I tell him about the rye flour hidden in the cellar? The flour that is supposed to go to his garrison, but that I have been slowly, carefully, suicidally redirecting to the families on Wadna Street whose children have eyes like skulls? Or do I smile and lie and become the kind of man my father would not recognize? The clock on the wall ticks. Tick, tick, tick. The officer clears his throat. I make my choice. I wake in darkness to the sound of my own breathing. There is no alarm clock anymore. They took it 6 months ago during one of the collection drives, when soldiers went door to door taking anything brass, anything copper, anything that could be melted down and turned into bullets. Now I wake to the rhythm of fear, the internal clock that never stops ticking, that counts down the hours until the next inspection, the next quota, the next impossible demand. The room is so cold I can see my breath. The window is covered with a blanket because the glass shattered during the bombing in 40 and there is no glass to replace it. No glass, no heat, no hope. I do not move for several seconds. I lie here in the dark, running through the checklist in my mind, the mental inventory that keeps me alive. The good flour is hidden. Check. The false bottom in the grain bin is secure. Check. The ration cards are forged but passable. Check. The ledger with the real numbers is buried in the garden under the rosebush that no longer blooms. Check. The ledger with the false numbers, the one that shows I'm a loyal supplier to the garrison, is on the counter in plain view. Check. I swing my legs out of bed. The floorboards are ice against my bare feet. I dress in the dark. Wool trousers that are too thin, patched 3 times. A shirt that was white once, now the color of old newspaper. A sweater my wife knitted before they took her to the work camp in the East. I do not think about where she is. I cannot afford to think about where she is. Grief is a luxury. Grief makes you slow. Slowness gets you killed. I pull on my boots. The left one has a hole in the sole. I have stuffed it with cardboard from a ration box, but the cardboard is disintegrating. When I walk, I can feel the cold seeping up through the bottom of my foot, like water through a sinking ship. I do not have money to repair it. I do not have connections to get new boots, so I walk, and I feel the ground, and I remind myself that feeling anything at all means I'm still alive. I go downstairs to the bakery. The shop is dark. The ovens are cold. Outside, the street is silent except for the distant rumble of a truck convoy moving through the city center. I do not turn on the lights yet. Lights mean attention. Attention means questions. I light a single candle and carry it to the cellar door. The stairs creak. I know which ones. 3rd step, 7th step, 9th step. I step over them. Silence is survival. The cellar smells like earth and mildew and the faint ghost-like scent of yeast. There are shelves down here, and on those shelves are sacks. Most of them contain sawdust. Some contain potato starch. 3 of them, hidden behind a false wall that I built myself using boards from my father's old workbench, contain real rye flour. 50 kilograms total. Enough to make bread that actually sustains, bread that does not crumble into dust in your mouth, bread that could keep a family alive for a month. It is also enough to get me shot. I move 1 sack aside. I take a small tin bowl and scoop 2 kilograms of the real flour into a burlap bag. I tie it tightly. I hide it inside my coat, pressed against my ribs. It makes a lump. If someone looks closely, they will see it. So I cannot let anyone look closely. Cannot, must not, will not. I return upstairs. I light the ovens. The wood is damp and takes forever to catch. I blow on the embers, coaxing them to life, and I think about my father. He used to say, "A good fire is like a good lie. You start it small, you feed it carefully, and you never let it burn too hot or it consumes everything." I didn't understand what he meant then. I understand now. The city is waking up. I step out into the street and lock the bakery door behind me. The lock is old, but it still works. Not that it matters. If they want to get in, they will get in. Locks are theater. Locks are the illusion of control in a world where control was taken from us so gradually that we did not even notice until it was too late. The sky is the color of ash. It has been 3 years since I've seen a blue sky. I do not know if this is the smoke from the factories, or the smoke from the camps in the east, or simply the way the world looks now. I do not ask. Asking questions is dangerous. I walk west toward Wadna Street. The buildings on either side of me are hollow. Some of them are bombed-out shells, their windows like missing teeth. Others are occupied, but the people inside do not open their curtains. The rule is simple. If you do not see, you cannot testify. I pass a checkpoint at the corner of WWII Street. There are 2 soldiers standing guard. One of them is smoking. The other is kicking at a loose cobblestone with the toe of his boot. They glance at me. I do not make eye contact. I keep my shoulders rounded, my gait slow, my expression blank. I am a baker. I am no one. I am not worth noticing. One of them says something in German. I do not speak German fluently, but I have learned enough to survive. He is telling a joke. His companion laughs. The sound is sharp and metallic, like the snap of a rat trap. I keep walking. The lump of flour presses against my ribs. Every step I take, I expect a shout, a command to stop, a hand on my shoulder. I expect to be searched, to be discovered, to be dragged into the alley and shot while the morning commuters walk past pretending not to hear. But the shout does not come. Not yet. I turn onto Wadna Street. This street used to be full of children. I remember them playing kick the can in the summer, their laughter echoing off the brick walls. Laughter. When was the last time I heard laughter? Now it is silent. The families here are still alive, but barely. They are the ones who lost their ration cards, the ones who were accused of hoarding, the ones whose men were taken for forced labor and never came back. They survive on scraps, on charity, on the small, quiet rebellions of people like me who cannot save everyone but refuse to save no one. I stop at number 17. I knock twice, pause, knock once. The code. The door opens a crack. A woman's face appears. She is 40, but she looks 70. Her eyes are sunken. Her hair is the color of old straw. She sees the bag in my hand and her expression does not change, but her fingers tremble as she reaches for it. "Bless you," she whispers. I shake my head. "Do not bless me. Just do not tell anyone." She nods. The door closes. I hear the sound of a lock sliding into place. Click. I turn and walk back the way I came. The checkpoint soldiers are still there. One of them has finished his cigarette and is grinding it into the cobblestones with his heel. He glances at me again. This time, his gaze lingers. Too long. My heart is a fist pounding against my sternum. Pound, pound, pound. He looks away. I breathe. I return to the bakery. The ovens are hot now. The shop smells like burning wood and the faint bitter tang of ersatz coffee made from roasted acorns. It does not taste like coffee. It tastes like regret, but it is warm, and warmth is a currency worth more than gold. I unlock the front door. I flip the sign from closed to open. I wait. At 7:15, the first customer arrives. She is an old woman with a scarf tied over her hair. She doesn't speak. She places 2 ration coupons on the counter. I give her a loaf of sawdust bread. It weighs almost nothing. She takes it, tucks it under her arm, and leaves. No eye contact, no words, no connection. At 7:30, a man comes in. He's wearing a coat with a yellow star sewn onto the breast. He is not supposed to be here. There are new rules, new restrictions, but I do not turn him away. I give him a roll made from potato starch. He pays me with a button. It is brass. It is worth something. I do not ask where he got it. At Muag, the officer arrives. Him, I know him. Everyone knows him. His name is Commandant Fisher, though we do not say his name aloud. We call him the inspector because he inspects everything. The grain deliveries, the ration distribution, the loyalty of bakers and butchers and tailors. He is tall, clean-shaven, with pale eyes the color of dirty ice. He smells like cologne and leather and authority. He steps into my shop and the temperature drops. "Good morning," he says in accented Polish. I say, "Good morning, Commandant." He walks slowly around the shop. He runs his gloved finger along the counter, checking for dust. He glances at the shelves, which are mostly empty. He looks at the ovens. He looks at me. "Your delivery this week," he says. It was light. My throat is dry. I swallow. "The mill, Commandant. They said there was a delay. The trains—" He raises his hand. I stop talking immediately. "I am not interested in excuses," he says. His voice is calm. That is what makes it terrifying. Anger I can predict. Calm is a blade hidden in a smile. "I am interested in results. The garrison requires 300 kilograms of bread per week. You delivered 220. I nod. "I understand, Commandant. I will make up the difference." He steps closer. I can smell the cologne now. It is too strong. It is trying to cover something else. Sweat, fear, even the wolves are afraid in this forest. He leans in and says quietly, "You will make up the difference, or I will find someone who can." I meet his gaze. This is important. If I look away, he will know I am lying. If I hold his gaze too long, he will think I am challenging him. I count to 3 in my head. 1, 2, 3. Then I nod and look down. "Yes, Commandant." He straightens. He adjusts his gloves. He turns toward the door, then pauses. "You have a cellar, yes?" No. My blood turns to ice water. "Yes, Commandant. I will inspect it. Next week." He leaves. The bell above the door jingles. The sound is cheerful. Absurd. I stand there staring at the space where he was, and I feel the walls closing in. Next week, he will inspect the cellar. He will find the false wall. He will find the rye flour. He will find the evidence of my betrayal. I have 7 days to hide 50 kilograms of flour, or I have 7 days to decide if I want to die a coward or a martyr. The morning rush is over. I bake another batch of sawdust loaves. The recipe is simple: 10 parts sawdust to 3 parts potato starch to 1 part real flour for binding. You add water until it holds together. You bake it until it is hard enough to pass as bread. It tastes like nothing. It provides almost no nutrition, but it is legal. It meets the quotas. It keeps the ovens running and the shop open and me alive. I am kneading a batch of dough when the bell jingles again. I look up. It is Father WWII. He is a small man, thin as a rail, with a face like a sad hound. He is the priest from St. Stanislaus, the church 3 blocks away. The church is still open, though the Nazis watch it carefully. Religion is tolerated as long as it remains quiet, as long as it does not inspire rebellion. Father WWII is not quiet. He steps up to the counter and says in a low voice, "I need bread." I wipe my hands on my apron. "How much?" "Enough for 30 people. I stare at him. 30? He nods. "Families, hiding in the church basement. They came last night. They have nothing." I glance toward the window. The street outside is empty, but emptiness means nothing. There are eyes everywhere. I say, "Father, I cannot—" "Please," he says. His voice cracks. "They are children. Some of them. Just children." I close my eyes. I think about my wife. I think about the woman on Wadna Street. I think about the officer's pale eyes and his promise to inspect my cellar. I think about my father and the rolling pin and the quiet dignity of creating something that sustains. I open my eyes. "Come back at midnight," I say. "Knock on the rear door 3 times. Pause twice." He exhales. "God bless you." I shake my head. If God is watching, Father, he would have stopped this a long time ago. I eat lunch in the back room. It is not really lunch. It is a slice of sawdust bread and a cup of the ersatz coffee. The bread disintegrates into dry, flavorless chunks in my mouth. I chew mechanically, forcing it down. My stomach cramps. It does not recognize this as food, but it is all I have. All I have. The coffee is worse. It is bitter and thin and tastes like burned bark, but it is hot, and heat is comfort, and I hold the cup in both hands and let the warmth seep into my fingers. I think about real coffee. I think about butter. I think about eggs and honey and the way my mother used to make pierogi, the dough thin and tender, the filling rich with potatoes and cheese. I think about abundance. I think about the time before. Then I stop thinking about it, because memory is a trap. Memory makes you weak. There is a knock at the front door. I stand. I walk back into the shop. Through the glass, I see a boy. He cannot be more than 12. He is wearing a coat that is too large for him, and his face is streaked with dirt. I open the door. "Are you the baker?" he asks. I nod. He reaches into his coat and pulls out a scrap of paper. It is folded tightly. He hands it to me, then turns and runs. I unfold the paper. It says, "They know about Wadna Street. Be careful, there is no signature." I stand there holding the note and I feel the world tilt. They know. Someone saw me, someone talked, someone betrayed me, or someone betrayed themselves, and now the net is tightening. I burn the note in the oven. I watch the paper curl and blacken and turn to ash. Then I go to the cellar and stare at the false wall and try to calculate how long I have. Hours? Days? Not long enough. My hands are cracking. The skin on my knuckles splits open when I clench my fists, and blood seeps into the dough. I have no lotion, no salve. I wrap them in strips of cloth torn from an old shirt, but the cloth soaks through and becomes stiff with dried blood. Every time I knead dough, the pain shoots up my forearms, sharp, burning. Every time I lift a sack of flour, my back screams. I am 34 years old, and my body feels 70. This is the cost. The cold seeps into my bones. The hunger makes me lightheaded. The fear sits in my chest like a stone, pressing down, making it hard to breathe. But I keep working, because stopping means thinking, and thinking means drowning. The shop closes at 5. I lock the door. I sweep the floor. I count the ration coupons and tally them in the false ledger. The numbers match. On paper, I am a loyal supplier. On paper, I am one of them. I sit down at the counter and stare at my hands. They are the hands of a liar. They are the hands of a thief. They are the hands of a man who steals from wolves to feed lambs, knowing that eventually, inevitably, the wolves will notice. But they are also the hands of a baker, and a baker creates. A baker sustains. A baker keeps people alive. I do not know if that is enough. I do not know if that redeems anything. But it is all I have. They will write books about the battles, the names of the generals, the dates of the invasions, the maps with little arrows showing the movement of armies, but they will not write about this. The quiet choices made in freezing cellars, the calculations of survival measured in kilograms of flour, the lies told with steady voices while your heart tries to claw its way out of your chest, the compromise of dignity just to see another sunrise. If you want to remember the people, not just the politics, if you want to witness the history they do not teach in school, the history that happens in bakeries and butcher shops and churches, then you are in the right place. Subscribe, bear witness, remember us when this is over, because if you do not remember, then all of this, the fear, the hunger, the tiny rebellions, will disappear like smoke, and we will have suffered for nothing. I sit at the table in my apartment and do the math. 50 kilograms of flour in the cellar. Enough to feed 30 people for 1 week if I stretch it. Enough to get me executed if they find it. The inspection is in 7 days. If I give all the flour to Father Wojciech tonight, I have nothing left to hide. The cellar is clean. I survive. But 30 people starve. If I keep the flour and move it, I risk being caught in the act. I risk someone seeing me. I risk the boy's warning coming true. If I do nothing, the officer finds the flour and I die. 3 choices. All of them bad. I pour myself a glass of water from the bucket by the door. The water is cloudy. It tastes like rust. I drink it anyway. I think about my father. He died before the war, before any of this. He died in his sleep peacefully, in a world that still made sense. I envy him. Not because he is dead, but because he died believing that goodness mattered, that doing the right thing was always the right thing. I do not have that luxury. Goodness here is not a virtue. It is a gamble, and the house always wins. I make my decision. I go down to the cellar. I move the false wall. I take all 50 kilograms of flour and load it into burlap sacks. My back screams. My hands leave blood on the cloth. I do not care. I do not care. I carry the sacks up the stairs one at a time. I stack them by the rear door. At 11:55, I hear the knock. 3 times. Pause. Twice. I open the door. Father Wojciech is standing there with 2 other men. They are younger, stronger. They do not speak. They load the sacks into a cart covered with a tarp. The whole operation takes less than 3 minutes. Father Wojciech clasps my hand. I will pray for you, he says. I say, pray for them. I have made my peace. The cart rolls away into the darkness. I close the door. Click. I go down to the cellar. I look at the empty space where the flower was. The false wall is still there, but it is hollow now. If the officer inspects it, he will find nothing, except evidence that something was hidden. And that is almost worse than finding the flower itself, because it proves I'm a liar. It proves I'm a traitor. And in this city, under this regime, proof is a death sentence. I return to my apartment. I sit on the edge of my bed. I do not undress. I do not sleep. I think about the woman on Wadna Street. I think about the families in the church basement. I think about the boy with the warning note. I think about all the people I have helped and all the people I could not help and all the people I will never be able to help. I think about my wife. I do not know if she is alive. I do not know if she thinks about me. I do not know if she would recognize the man I have become. I hope she would understand. I hope she would forgive me. But I do not know. I do not know. I wake to the sound of boots on cobblestones. They are coming. I do not know how I know, but I know. I dress quickly. I go downstairs to the bakery. I light the ovens. I begin to knead dough because if I'm going to die today, I will die working. At 5:00 a.m., the door crashes open. There are 4 of them. Soldiers. The officer is not with them. These are the enforcers, the ones who do the dirty work. One of them shouts at me in German. I do not understand the words, but I understand the tone. They grab me by the arms. They drag me out into the street. The sky is the color of ash. The street is empty. No one is watching, or everyone is watching and pretending not to. They throw me into the back of a truck. The metal floor is cold. It smells like oil and fear. I sit there, hands bound, and I think about the rolling pin. I think about my father's words. A good fire is like a good lie. You start it small, you feed it carefully, and you never let it burn too hot. I fed my fire too well. I let it burn too bright, and now it has consumed me. They take me to a building I have never seen before. It is gray stone with narrow windows like wounds. Inside, the air is damp and smells like mildew and old blood. They push me into a room. There is a table, a single chair, a light bulb hanging from the ceiling. I sit down. The officer enters. He does not look angry. He looks disappointed. "You were careless," he says. I do not respond. He places a file on the table, opens it. Inside are photographs. Me on Wadna Street, me at the rear door of the bakery, me loading sacks into Father Wojciech's cart. They photographed everything. "We have been watching you for weeks," he says. "We knew. We let you continue because we wanted to see how far you would go, how many others you would implicate." I feel sick. He leans forward. "Give me names. Tell me who else is involved. Do this, and you live." I think about the woman with the trembling fingers. I think about Father Wojciech. I think about the boy with the note. I think about my wife. I say, "I worked alone." The officer sighs. "That is a shame." He stands. He walks to the door. He pauses. "You understand," he says, "that you accomplished nothing. The people you fed will starve next week. The families you helped will be found. Your sacrifice is meaningless." I look him in the eye. I say, "Maybe, but I will sleep better than you." He leaves. Slam. I do not know what happens next. I sit in the room alone, and I wait. I think about the rolling pin. I think about the flour dust on my apron. I think about the way bread smells when it is baking, that yeasty golden warmth that fills a room and makes it feel like home. I think about creation. I think about resistance. I think about the small, quiet ways we fight back against the wolves, even when we know we cannot win. I do not regret what I did. I regret that I could not do more. Hours pass, or maybe minutes. Time does not work the same way here. Eventually, the door opens. A soldier gestures for me to stand. I stand. He leads me down a long hallway. We pass other rooms. I hear sounds behind the doors, crying, shouting, silence. We reach a courtyard. The sky is still the color of ash. There is a wall. I understand. They line me up against the wall. There are others here. I recognize one of them, a teacher from the school on WWII Street. We make eye contact. He nods. I nod back. We do not speak. What is there to say? The soldiers raise their rifles. I close my eyes. I think about my father. I think about the rolling pin. I think about the dough, soft and yielding under my hands, rising in the warmth of the oven, becoming something more than the sum of its parts. I think about the 30 people in the church basement, eating the bread I made, staying alive for one more day. Maybe the officer is right. Maybe it is meaningless. But maybe meaning is not measured in outcomes. Maybe meaning is measured in the attempt. If I survive this, if by some miracle the rifles do not fire, if someone intervenes, if the world shifts in some unexpected way, I will go home. I will light the ovens. I will knead dough. I will bake bread. And I will remember that every loaf I made, every crumb I smuggled, every lie I told to keep someone alive was an act of defiance, not against an army, against despair. But I do not think I will survive. I think this is the end. And maybe that is all right. Because I stood at the crossroads, and I chose mercy over safety. I chose the lambs over the wolves. I chose to be a baker, not a collaborator. And if that is how my story ends, if that is the last line in the ledger, then let it be written. He baked bread. He fed the hungry. He did not look away. The rifles fire. Crack. The sound echoes off the stone walls. The sky remains the color of ash. And somewhere, in a church basement, 30 people eat bread that tastes like hope. They do not know my name. They do not know what it cost, but they are alive. And that is enough. Somewhere else, some other morning. If you are listening to this, if you are still here, then you understand. This is not a story about heroes. This is a story about choices, the small, impossible choices we make in the dark, when no one is watching, when there is no reward except the knowledge that you tried. The world will not remember me. There will be no statue, no plaque, no mention in the history books. But I will be there, in the margins, in the footnotes, in the quiet spaces between the battles and the speeches and the grand narrative of good versus evil. I will be the baker who hid flour in his cellar. I will be the man who chose mercy when survival demanded cruelty. I will be the one who believed, even at the end, that a single loaf of bread mattered, because it did, because we all matter, even when the world tells us we do not. I scrub the flour from my hands. The water turns white, then clear. The stain is gone, but the memory remains. The memory always remains. I blow out the candle. I survived today, but the sun will rise in 6 hours, and I have to learn how to lie all over again.